our next governor, Congressman Tim Walz.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. I am grateful. Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. I am grateful because all of those things were done hand in hand with you. All of those things of fighting for the middle class were done hand in hand with you. And to each and every one of you, it's a privilege to be with you. I think it needs to be spoken. This last week was terrible. There's no denying that. What happened on Saturday, it doesn't do us any good not to look away from it, because I've recognized, and I have a 17-year-old daughter, Hope, and I turned to her and said, he will be a Supreme Court justice my entire lifetime. And she said, I will be your age, Dad, before he's gone. And then she turned and said what all of you are saying is, what the hell are we going to do about it? What are we going to do to stand up to it? What are we going to do to make a difference? And I think it's clear, and in being in this room, I understand the importance of being here with each of you. It's not by chance that every year when they do a list of the most respected professions, nurses are at the top of the list, year in and year out. You come with more credibility than any other profession, and I think it's because of that sense of everyone knows what your ultimate goal is, and everything you're doing here today is to care for people, to deliver care in the best manner, to make sure we're doing things right for people. It's not about the politics as an end. It's what this group understands, maybe better than any other group, that politics is a means to an end, and that end is a better life for people, better care, better opportunities. And that is such a noble thing to do. I would have to say, though, in disclosure, with nurses at the top, number 2 is teachers and then soldiers. So I've got 2 of the 3 with me. So, but again, we know what happened and we know what's out there. But here's what I would say to you, and here's what I believe, and this issue of what you believe and why we come here. Those who say that they're just not that into politics or tired of it, too bad. Politics is into you. That's the answer we need to give people. It is going to impact everything you do. We are going to have horrific decisions come down, everything from women's reproductive rights to how we deal with our immigrant community. Those things are going to come down. And we understood early on that the fights are going to be at the state level. The fights are going to be us together, grassroots level, hand in hand. And I've often said this. I've had a privilege that was bestowed by being a member of Congress from the 1st Congressional District. I stood on that inaugural platform on a cold January day in 2009 when newly elected President Barack Obama gave a speech about how we will all do better and inclusion. And it wasn't America first, it was America helping others, standing side by side with them, of making sure everyone was in and nobody was out. And I remember thinking to myself when I was setting up there, at that time I had very young children, and I said, that's the world I want my children to grow up in. That's the place I wanted to. And as I looked down that mall and the millions of people cheering, it was that dawning of a new day, the one that so many of you have worked for. But then I think we all came to the realization, me maybe a little later than others, I lived at a time and of an age, and being very clear, being a white man in middle America, things kind of come easy sometimes that you don't have to work for. They just kind of come to you. And that piece of it, of understanding, I was in a profession where giants came before me and fought for the collectively right to bargain. I was living in a place when my father died, there was Social Security survivor benefits and Medicaid to help my mom out. Really smart thing. And when it came time to go to school, there were wonderful, affordable, without student loan debt public universities that you could go to and get a great education. Those things were built on the backs of those who came before us. And the dawning that came to me is many of us think you solve a problem and move on. But what the reality of it is, each generation has to renew this. Each generation has to go back at that. So what I saw is from that time in January of 2009, I also sat on that dais in January of 2017, when then President-elect Trump gave a speech that I could only describe as the screenplay to Mad Max 3 or something, this hellhole of America and this selfishness, and that we're closing in upon itself, and we're going to do these things, and we're going to build walls, and we're going to cut back, and we're going to shrink and become small. And the disappointment or the horror that all of us felt lasted about 12 hours, because it seems like a metaphor, but it was not. The next morning after that speech he gave, was a bright, sunny day on the National Mall, and I had the privilege of joining 800,000, mostly women, say, nope, that's not the place we're living in. That's not the country we're going to live in. So here's what you know and what I know, and my responsibility to you is that we work hand in hand. We know that we must win this governor's race, not to win a political election, but to impact people's lives. We must know that when we say it, that everybody impacted by these decisions must have a seat at the table. So let's all be very clear. If we're going to be talking healthcare and healthcare reform, nurses must be central to that discussion. They must be at the table. And the reason for that is because people's lives will be improved if you're there. People's access to health care will be improved by you being there. This profession will continue to attract and retain the greatest quality people this nation can produce because we are showing the respect for what it takes. And that means listening to you about workplace safety, listening to you about access, listening to you about staffing levels, listening to you about access in rural areas. That's what's going to happen. And then translate the listening into action. So here's what's in front of us. They did, and the genius of this democracy and the danger of the democracy. Winston Churchill was right when he said, this is the worst form of government ever, except for every other one. And amongst that sets that when it exerts itself as we've seen, and when we see it run roughshod as we saw Saturday, and we see the diminishment and the weakening of people's civil rights, that is a vision that they've created. And they have used the system to lay that out. But here's the upside of that. They have given us an opportunity and a blank palette, especially in the states, to create the world we want to see, to create the policies that improve people's lives, to change the way things go. So let's be clear. You knew this was coming. You knew it when you were out there. You knew when you were campaigning for the last couple of years. And you knew that it was about issues and people that would come and go. But here's what we knew it would come down to is, we're laying out, all of us, laying out a vision of a more equal society, a society that says healthcare is a basic need and must be delivered, a society where we say welcoming makes us stronger, and who we are as a people is reflected on the kindness and the generosity. And hell, even if you have no moral implications to bring immigrant communities in, it's just smart economics because they grow our economy and they create strong communities. That's just smart stuff. You knew that we were going to lay out a vision that looked like that in opposition. And you also knew that they were going to run a campaign. Can you imagine running for governor of Minnesota on the platform of saying, get the hell out, no immigrants here, no driver's licenses for you, cutting back on health care, and we just can't think boldly enough. At a damn debate for governor of Minnesota, you have a candidate saying, climate change might be real or not, but there's nothing we can do about it. Can you imagine that that's the vision that they gave? But here's the upside of that. They have decided that in 29 days, we are going to have a vote in this state, but it is far more than that. It is a referendum on the state we want to live in. They have asked the people of Minnesota to go out and vote in this race, where one candidate says, we are going to welcome immigrants, we are going to do what's right, we are going to protect our communities, and the other says, out, nothing here. We are running a campaign that one candidate says we must cut back, and real innovative ideas like a cross-state line sales of insurance. If anybody ever says that in a healthcare debate, they're done. You listen to nothing else. It makes no sense. It doesn't work in this idea. Or someone running on a campaign that we can't invest in our children because we just can't afford it after we gave a $150 million tax credit for premium tobacco last year. Or someone who says we can't hold pharmaceutical companies accountable to try and fix the opioid epidemic by being partners in this to do that. Listening to the healthcare professionals who know we have to do that. So here's the deal. And this is where I think the Minnesota Nurses Association taught me an awful lot during this campaign. That the sense of incrementalism to get things done and the ability to build coalitions, I'm proud of things that I've been able to get done in Congress. And I'm proud to work with coalitions to get there. None of that's going to change. But what's changed in this country over the last 2 years is what they have done and what they are bringing to this. And what happened on Saturday reinforces what I think many of you in here have known for a long time, that the time for incrementalism has passed. The time for bold action on an agenda is here. And that may be the one gift that this administration has given us, because your neighbors believe that too. This referendum gives us the opportunity to come back and say, and I get it, many times what people are saying is, incrementalism comes from a position of privilege. You're okay with moving things slowly if it's not impacting you or the people you know. It's not okay to move slowly on health care with hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans at risk of not having care at all. It's not okay to move slowly when as a teacher, I am incredibly proud that this state does as well as any state in the nation of educating our children if they're white. We don't do as well if they're not. Right. And for that, all of us own that. And if this nation's not going to take a role, which you know, the climate crisis is an existential threat to our planet, but it's going to manifest itself first and foremost in decreased health outcomes, more asthma for children, more difficulties. You are going to have to deal with climate change on the front end in a very human manner. And to refuse to address that is simply capitulating on our moral responsibilities as stewards of the planet. So we've got 29 days. We've got 29 days, and it is rare when you get the opportunity to impact things for a generation. This is a redistricting year, and we know how they will operate if they should win and hold full control of Minnesota. We know that right to work will come marching in, just like it did in Wisconsin and Iowa. We know that they will kick people off of insurance and then tell them that the free market will somehow miraculously do something about it. And we will de-incentivize movements to a clean energy economy that will not only hurt the planet, it will put us at an economic disadvantage. So here's our opportunity. And I know more clearly than maybe any other organization that's out there that I am preaching to the choir about political action. I know that I am preaching to the choir of why it matters to knock doors, but the choir needs to sing loudly. We must make sure that we maintain those two incredible Senate seats that we have right now by making sure Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith are reelected. We must do that. And we have an opportunity with the slate of candidates to make a run at every single one of these congressional seats. And I have to tell you, instead of the debacle that happened on Saturday, there's some real questions that need to be asked and some real investigations. And I, for one, want to see some damn tax returns come January from people. That will happen in Congress. So I understand and want to be very clear. I understand the responsibility that comes with the endorsement of this organization. It is not a pat on the back. It is a kick straight in the butt to take your priorities to do all I can. The governor and the lieutenant governor, and as candidates, and should we have the privilege of being elected, are one seat at the table. And many times, they're not the head seat at the table. The message we've been delivering, that you've been delivering, is that it's not going to be okay. We'll move beyond incrementalism. We know we don't want what they have there is, but they've also opened a chance to truly reform the participatory aspect of government, to bring people to the table and change how state agencies work, to change how rank and file members of teachers and nurses and laborers have a seat to influence policy that really makes a difference. So my pledge to you is Peggy Flanagan and I will do everything in our power to make sure that we're winning this campaign. We're doing it with dignity that reflects upon the dignity of the work that you do, but that we are thinking in a manner that we were never running just to win an election. We are running so that we can govern and improve people's lives. That's at the heart of it. So thank you, nurses. Let's do this.
Thank you.
Thank you.